September, as most of you know, we were closed down for the last 3 months for the summer. And then last month we were closed down because of the attack of the tree. And Liz brought some of the pictures that were taken up at the archives of that event, and it has taken us about a month to get the repairs done and back in operation. But we're certainly glad to have you here, and I kind of feel like that we may have been invaded by some Lonsdale-ites. How many of you are from Lonsdale? Or in that vicinity? Welcome to you, and if you're not a member of the Garland County Historical Society, we certainly invite you and urge you to join for $22 a year. You're a member, you're entitled to come to all the meetings, and in addition you get a copy of the record. That's our yearly publication. It has about 150 or so pages, and it contains various stories and articles about Garland County, Hot Springs, and the people that have lived here over the years. First of all, I think we need to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. If you'll join me, please. Minutes, I dare you to try to correct it. No, if there are any corrections, please let us know. If not, I'll entertain a motion that we adopt the minutes as read. Is there a second? Second? Second. Thank you. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. All right. Liz, is somebody going to introduce you?
Oh, I can just leave it up there.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me.
You remember probably the program.
Introduce yourself to our program.
Thank you all for coming here today. Is the volume okay? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Especially appreciate, as Orval called them, the Lonsdale-ites who came, and I hope I don't have much wrong in this program, but if so, I hope you'll correct me, and please jump in any time with anything you want to add during the program or after it. You know, Lonsdale, which is, everybody know it's on Highway 88, about 17 miles northeast of Hot Springs. And it's a small community, but it certainly has a rich history. People were living in that area before the Civil War, including the Houts, Morfords, and the Rutherfords. Do we happen to have any of those here today? Ah, well. The Egbert Hout home became a stage stop and relay station on the stage line that developed between Little Rock and Hot Springs. Would it help if the light was down here a little bit? Yeah. Clyde, could you work that light switch in the back room?
Probably not.
And the W.H. Hout family was there when the Civil War broke out. And he went off to be a soldier, but he got the measles in camp and he died. His wife, Octavia, remained and raised the family on the farm they'd been homesteading. And many generations of that family grew up in Lonsdale. Now, the town that was established later in that area was named for its founder, John Gertie's Lonsdale, a nationally known Hot Springs banker. It was his career as a railroad man, though, that put the town of Lonsdale on the map. He was born in 1832. When he was 6, though, his grandparents on his father's side and his father died in Memphis of yellow fever. His mother moved in with a brother-in-law in Kentucky, but she died 2 years later when John was just 8 years old. Soon after that, the young boy and his sister Ann moved to Hot Springs to live with their aunt Matilda, who was his mother's sister, and her husband, J.P. Maillard. J.P. Maillard had come here in the early 1870s and had begun a successful career in real estate and in insurance. Here's a room inside the Maillard House at 602 Quapaw in which John Lonsdale grew up. Looks nice, doesn't it? You could see that J.P. Maillard did very well in business in Hot Springs. This was an elegant home. It was later bought by the Creason family. Some of you may know Bill Creason. It was bought by his ancestors. And then a later owner bought it and tore it down and put up a modern ranch brick house in its place. While he was growing up in this home, John went to Jones School and to St. Luke's Episcopal Church. He got his further education in Virginia, New York, and in Maryland. And then he came back to Hot Springs in 1891 and started his career off as a clerk. For a while he was a clerk at the Whittington Stearns hardware store and then for his uncle. He enjoyed socializing with the young society set of the day. He's the third man from the left, which would be with the 1, 2, 3. The first one in the back row on the left. That's him as a very young man. And some of the other people in the coach are named Ricks, Stint, Gaines, Rector. This was the young generation of those founding families of Hot Springs. Within a remarkably short time, he prospered, and he bought this home at 805 Quapaw, which is still standing there today. He was also made a partner in his uncle's firm in 1894. Now, this Lonsdale house later belonged for many years to the Ray Smith family, and sometimes it's called the Smith home. And I believe it's still for sale now, isn't it? Y'all know it's still for sale now. You could buy this house, y'all. It has an elevator. That would be neat.
That's us fun.
Well, John became even more successful than his uncle Maillard. He became an officer of the Little Rock, Hot Springs and Western Railroad, a bond and stock partner in the firm in New York and Hot Springs of Gaines and Lonsdale, the director of the New York Hotel Company, an owner of the Eastman Hotel, a director of the Security Bank, a member of the New York Stock Exchange firm of Logan and Bryan, and the president of the National Bank of Commerce in St. Louis, and its successor, the Mercantile Commerce Bank and Trust Company. He was elected president of the American Bankers Association in 1929, and estimates of his wealth range from $200 to $300 million, which was real money in the late 20s and 30s and 40s. Well, he didn't get rich by passing up an opportunity. There's one story in one of the records that says when he was a young clerk at the Stearns hardware store, the circus put up a poster in the window advertising that the circus would be in town in about a month. Well, he found out that the circus would set up at one of 2 fields in town, and usually they gave the owner of the field a few free passes as payment. Well, when the circus got to town a month later and they went to first one field and then the other, they were told, oh, young John Lonsdale has leased that field for this week. You'll have to go talk to him. And when they did, he said, oh, you can use either field you want, but you got to pay me $50. And at first they were a little irritated, but he must have been a charming man because pretty soon they were laughing about it and they gave him a lifetime pass to the circus, which he was still using 40 years later at Madison Square Garden, using his free pass for that to see the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus. Mary Hudgens visited him at his home in Lonsdale and saw his study, and she said he had a beautiful, beautiful, very expensive banker's desk, a desk there that he had used when he was president of one of those banks, but that the chair that went with it was just a really cheap, inexpensive thing. And he said that that was the chair he'd sat in when he was a clerk years before at Stearns hardware store. And that's kind of a neat way to always remember the journey you've taken through life. Of course, maybe it was a really comfortable chair too. Well, let's go back a little bit in time. As secretary, and by the way, some of these pictures aren't too clear, because I had to scan them. Well, you should see the originals I scanned them from. Sometimes old yellow newspapers and things, so sometimes that's why the quality isn't as good as we'd love it to be. In 1894, John Lonsdale was Secretary and Treasurer of the Little Rock, Hot Springs, and Texas Railroad. Well, in 1896, it went bankrupt, and he was appointed its receiver. So then in 1899, he and two partners, including Samuel Fordyce of Hot Springs, reorganized the railroad as the Little Rock and Hot Springs Western, which, as we all know, became known as the Hot Western. Now, newspaper man Maurice Moore, who wrote for the Sentinel Record in the 50s and 60s, told this story about Lonsdale. He calls him the young man. The young man walked alone in the wild country, carrying a brush and a bucket of black paint. He was inspecting ties of a railroad track project which had been abandoned because the company building the line from Little Rock to Hot Springs went bankrupt. A new company organized by himself and two partners took control in 1899. It was his task to mark the ties which were still usable. He'd started his trek at Benton and was en route to Hot Springs, a distance of some 36 miles. He'd walked a long way and was tired. It was late in the afternoon when he passed the field where J.D. Hout and his children were hoeing cotton. He stopped, introduced himself, and asked if the Houts could accommodate him for the night. Hout was very hospitable, so the young man climbed in the rear of the farmer's wagon along with the children. And Moore says this was the first formal visit Lonsdale made to the community that was later named in his honor. He returned many times while the railroad was under construction. There was no doubt, said Moore, that it was his favorite stopping place, especially after he discovered a refreshing mountain spring which he thought was the source of the best water in the world. He fell in love with the surroundings. The property on which the spring was located was owned by a homesteader named Parsons. According to one story, Parsons virtually gave Lonsdale the land with the stipulation that he get a shotgun and food and the right to stay on it as long as he lived. There was a one-room log cabin on the site. When Lonsdale took over, he added another room and brought his uncle, Lewis Todd, to live on the place. In 1899, Lonsdale persuaded families in the area to grant the right-of-way to the Little Rock and Hot Springs Western. According to legend, he told the locals, "Give me room and I'll build you a town." And they replied, "How much room do you need, John?" And the first train ran over the line on April 1, 1900, which was when this picture was taken and why you see the bunny. And on May 1st of that year, Lonsdale threw a festive celebration, which included an auction of 75 town lots, free barbecue, square dancing, and a wedding of twin sisters to their sweethearts on the large auction platform. It advertised for people who wanted to get married that day and gave them a town lot in exchange for having their wedding then. Here are the lucky couples. Twin sisters, Claudie and Maudie McClendon, who married Lee Wallace and Frank Young. Now we'll talk a little bit more about the train with this picture of the depot. Now, would anybody like to see that depot today? Do you know where it is? You know where Burrell's Smokehouse is? On the Mount Ida Highway, right where the turnoff is to Crystal Springs. He's got the depot there. So if you want to see it, go to Burrell's Smokehouse. It's really cool.